Okay. Hi, everyone. You're welcome to I guess this is officially the second GitHub triage issue meeting for the Kubernetes 6 Karpenter. So hopefully the goal here is to go through issues that have the label needs triage, as well as going through PRs so that we can at least dish out and assign them out to everybody and allow us to begin to move progress and divvy up some of the responsibility for at least getting back to customers that are asking questions or looking to contribute. So first thing that I would like us to talk about is at least the PRs. There aren't, I did an initial pass at them. There aren't really too many PRs that we really need to discuss. Mainly a few of them are, at least in the bottom ones, are at least from the maintainer team. So we will sort those out. Um, a few of them that have already been assigned, the mainly the ones that we would like to probably get assigned out are the newer PRs. So uh I'm thinking starting off at least here with this PR. Not sure if there was any conversations around this. Well, nobody at least from our team has responded, so it may be worthwhile to see if anybody has the bandwidth to take a look at this one. This is mainly just looking at the topology spread.
You all get the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I just had a question, Emmanuel. So I guess as someone relatively, I mean, I'm not new to the Carpenter code base, but I am new to kind of our triage and CI practices and everything. What is the current state of like end-to-end testing and whatnot? Like how easy it is for someone new to come and like start working on one of these issues? I'm guessing like, like looking at this spread topology one, like I'm guessing we're going to want tests and stuff like that to make sure we don't regress on the behavior or anything like that if we find the issue there.
Right. So we mainly have our unit tests. We have a little bit of integration tests uh, inside of the project, not things that are really extensive at the moment. We have initial ones that will run, but we don't actually have, they're running on kind clusters with the Quark provider, which isn't, well, we found at least in the past that it's not consistent in terms of working. So we do have at least action items to be able to clean those up and make them a little bit more reliable for us to test with, and also just flat out expand our integration testing suite. So at the moment, it would be at least from the integration testing perspective, it would be a little bit difficult to validate. Really, custom like the contributors would have to sit and manually test their code changes themselves. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like right now where we're at, any of these bugs that we pick up, like absolutely add unit tests if it makes sense to add unit tests, and then the end-to-end test or the integration test we'll have to kind of think about in a larger perspective when we get a little more bulked out there, is what it sounds like.
Right, yeah. I'm also, at least in the coming weeks, we're also planning on so for, I guess, for full transparency, most of the integration tests that we currently have today live inside of the AWS provider. So like what has happened really is that we make changes, we make these updates to the AWS provider, the full integration tests run there. And then that really becomes the main signal that we have for integration testing. We do have planned work that we're at least planning on things that have that really are testing core Carpenter to actually live inside of this Kubernetes 6 Carpenter. We just haven't had the chance to actually get that work done. But there are tests. It's just yeah. I mean, it lives
I,
inside of a provider at the moment, right?
I think you can get pretty far, honestly, with the existing test setup. Like, I think that especially the scheduling code is pretty extensively tested. Um, so I'd say like adding unit tests to anything we find is like pretty straightforward. And then as a matter of sanity checking, like Emmanuel said, like the Quack provider is a pretty easy way, I think, to get that configured. And if we find it difficult, then we can like work on improving it. I think we already have, like we said, we're we're trying to improve it in our CI, but I think it just hasn't been prioritized. I'm trying to remember if there's a
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
issue even for it, because like we could also talk about that as well, but
I mean, at some level, like, do it like the library, I would expect, you know, at some point we could probably build pretty deep mocking kind of tests for this because it's just a library dealing with generic data at that point, right? So like we should be able to get some really interesting testing going on there. But honestly, for what I'm doing, like hearing that they're mostly in the AWS tests, that makes good sense to me. And so like part of the reason I'm asking this question is because I want to get better at being able to help with Karpenter, right? So like I need to understand like how I can confirm my tests. And also like as Red Hat is getting deeper into Karpenter, we're looking to set up our own like end-to-end testing. And so like I'm wondering if maybe there's like, some sort of story we can collaborate on, or maybe for now we should be using, the AWS tests as kind of like our baseline for looking at things. So I'm kind of just feeling out the area here and understanding like the best ways to get involved.
Yeah, oh, definitely. But yeah, that's I guess the current state of the world right now. Um, so yeah, I guess for like a PR like this one, it's been open for a few weeks, so yeah, I guess I would mainly think we just have somebody assigned to keep track of it. It looks like Jason was actually the one assigned to this PR, or at least the issue. So well, I guess he actually created it. So I'll just assign him for the time being. And then we can come back and discuss at a later time, and then at least he will be able to do the initial triaging as well. Miko, I believe this is the PR that you mentioned last working group, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, this is probably going to require some reviews by people and whatnot. Basically, this is going to expand the way that Carpenter will allow labels from like the well-known domains to be applied. So we're trying to like, this feature is going to open it up to allow users to, like, for example, if you want to key off of the node, if you want to have a requirement that says like the node role.kubernetes.io label should be equal to this value, that's not standard, right? Like if you have the domain is node role.kubernetes.io slash, and then like I think control plane is like one of the valid options, but like worker is not a valid option. So this would allow a uh, wider, I guess, usage of requirements, and that also allows, I think, other labels to be put in, from those. It allows them to be applied to the nodes. But like carpenter.sh like prefix domains are still kept on the reserved list or whatever. So this change is really about opening that up, and I think this is probably one of those things where I think we should discuss it at a regular office hours again, just because this change will expand the behavior and might, some people might not be expecting it or something.
Well, would it be worthwhile? I'm not sure if it's already included, maybe to include an RFC with this PR just so that we can explain it and flush it out in more detail.
I mean, I think, yeah, that's probably not a bad, like, I don't think that's a bad idea. Like, I don't know how Alberto would feel about it because he wrote this, but if you look at if you go back to the conversation, there's an issue that this is related to. See that, yeah, that 1046. We had a really good discussion about this that started like last year. And I think we could probably turn a lot of the discussion that happened here into an RFC, and just to document like what we talked about and everything, because we had a lot of back and forth, like Tim had a lot of good points about like security and whatnot, and we went back and forth kind of talking about where the boundaries should lie on restricting these labels. And so in the end, we kind of came back, we kind of came full circle, like, back to the point where it's like, okay, we should allow these labels to be used because like Kubernetes security, part of the notion here was that we shouldn't have Karpenter allowing the node to label itself with one of the restricted labels or something, right? Or we should have an extra check here to make sure that Karpenter isn't using a restricted label on an actual node object that it's creating. And there's some good reasons for not allowing a kubelet to do that to itself because it could allow for like an escalation. But it should be normal for a user who has sufficient privileges to add whatever labels they would like to a node object. And so if you're using Karpenter and I'm the user who's deployed Karpenter, I should be able to authorize Karpenter to add whatever labels I want to the nodes. And so, when we kind of went back and forth about this, it's like, yes, technically speaking, Karpenter as like a user workload should be able to modify nodes however we like it to as the user deploying it. It should not have an artificial restriction that's in addition to whatever is on the kubelet logic. This is what we felt, right? And so, yeah, we went back and forth on that. And I think the agreement in the end is like Alberto put the PR up to show what it would look like. And, I think we all kind of agreed that it's like, okay, yes, a user could use Karpenter in the wrong way. They could put bad labels in and it would end up messing up their cluster. But that's not unique to Karpenter. You can do that with any number of projects that you could load into, Kubernetes. So yeah, so that's why we went to the PR. And I think there's probably another round of discussion that should take place before we agree to accept the change. But that's kind of what it's all about and everything.
Yeah.
This discussion went on for like a year, so you can see there's a lot going on there.
How involved does like SIG security get involved in these kinds of discussions, Amiko? Like, I'm just curious, like who the experts are in the space for projects that are interested in doing things. Like, because the second we give node permission,
Right,
that's basically what provides the escalation.
right,
If any is there, and it's like, okay, now the user has to understand, like you're saying, that the configuration they put on, or whoever they give permission to define Karpenter configuration objects has permission to do these kind of nasty things, which I think is kind of implicit to the fact that it's like creating nodes.
right.
But I'm curious if there's like specific people that we should be talking to, or are those people already involved in the conversation?
So Tim seems to really know the security well. I don't know if he's like a member of SIG Security or participates there, but Tim seemed to really know the low level mechanics well. I think probably like when we get to the point where we're ready to make a decision on this one way or the other, or maybe right before then, I think I'd be willing to go to SIG Security and kind of present this issue and ask some questions, or at least be part of a group from the Karpenter community. Because I think the real question here is if Karpenter is modifying a node after the node has been created, that's just normal Kubernetes behavior, right? Like I could do that as a user.
Mhm.
But if Karpenter is actually passing node labels into the kubelet configuration flags, I think that's where there was some issues about, you know, concerns about security, because I think that's kind of the point at which they were saying, okay, well, the kubelet is starting with these labels, which means there's nothing that has an opportunity to do anything else. And I think there was some worry about putting labels in there. So I think like it would be good to go one more time to SIG security, probably, given what you're saying, and just say, okay, what's the real story here? Like, are we creating a security breach by doing this? Like, are we doing something
Yeah.
improper?
I've heard all about the springboard attacks that exist on like I have a very tacit understanding of it, but I know that there's like this constant conversation about springboard attacks on nodes, and I don't fully understand like what the threat vectors are.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's probably, given that we're in the space of, of modifying nodes, it would be a good thing to understand, I think, a bit deeper, at least from some
right.
the
Like, and Tim talks about it a little bit in the beginning. Like if you look at the conversations from last year, it's really around like what Tim's point that I took out of this was it's really around the notion of the node being able to relabel itself and
Yeah,
escalate that way, right? But that's a mechanism of the kubelet. We're talking about running a completely separate, Carpenter is a totally separate thing, right? It's not doing any of this in the kubelet. It's doing it after the nodes are created. So
yeah,
functionally, what's the difference between having Karpenter do this or just me doing it with kubectl, right? Because if I had an admin, if I had an admin RBAC, I could go and change the node labels however I wanted to, right? So that was kind of the crux of the issue is that, should users be able to do this by default, you know? And the PR that Alberto has put up kind of changes it so you can use some of the Kubernetes well-known, some of the restricted domains, but you cannot use carpenter.sh and you can't touch the labels that like the CCM would put on the nodes, right? And there's a comment in there to make it, we should make it configurable, right? So maybe what we choose to do from the Karpenter aspect is we default configure Karpenter to have a very high level of security, so it doesn't allow those. But then we give the user a command line flag that says, okay, if you would like to make other domains available, and that's kind of what Alberto was setting up. Like if you wanted to make other domains be restricted, you could put them in that way. And so maybe the default way we bundle that uh, is with all these things turned off or something, right? But give users the ability to turn them on.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like there's a action item to go to SIG security, at least block the PR until somebody can like come back to this working group and like, or this issue triage and like have a good explanation for how these things are supposed to work. Is that something that like Aliko you'd want to do, or you'd want Alberto to do, or like
Yeah,
somebody?
you can put my name on it. Yeah, for sure. I'll sync up with Alberto and see what he wants to do. Because Alberto's a colleague who works on another team at Red Hat. So I'll sync with him and see like how he feels about it. And he knows the internals fairly well as well. And I'm guessing he probably doesn't think it's an issue, but like I'd be happy to go to SIG security and just talk about it with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think minimally, it seems like it would be good for somebody to come to the meeting and just like report specifically what's been said, just so we can like make an educated decision on it.
Right, right. And if SIG security is like, hey, you're writing your own controller, you can do whatever the hell you want to, then it's just up to us to make the decision.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And that's where I say we might want to default to the more restricted way because it maybe is a better user experience for people, but that's something that we could decide as a group.
Sounds good.
Cool. Sounds great. Well,
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah. Okay, then so we have the degraded node pool status condition, which is just currently in an RFC. Having conversations around it. If you have a chance, please feel free to go and add any feedback that you may have around that this PR. Next thing we have reserved capacity. This is ODCR. Support still in work in progress, so we can let that be. This PR is, I looked at it this morning. This is just mainly around updating a few constants in our code base. So I can assign this one to myself and just take a look at it later.
I think Shigisha may have already been looking at it, if I remember correctly. She can comment though. I think she's here.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I'd started looking into this. Looks like they moved stuff under events package, and I guess I'm gonna follow up on this, ask them to move it over to the APS package like Jonathan had suggested earlier. So yeah, you
Did
can.
we confirm just like from like an upstream style perspective that like that's kind of where these like event reasons end up living? I guess there's a question. I mean, it's kind of our code, our structure, but I was curious if we could like adhere to something that is consistent with upstream. I guess we're upstream, but like consistent with the Kubernetes code base,
Okay.
I'll send
like a
this to you.
spot check. Yeah.
Cool. Then going through, I believe that should be it. Everything else, well, there's this PR. Last time we took a look at it around updating our scheduling algorithm to using the heap. There wasn't, the user provided a little bit of data here around some benchmarking, but they did say that it didn't actually improve it by that much, so I don't know if it's a worthwhile thing to take in. Um, but anybody have the bandwidth to be able to at least validate and take a look at this? Also, they have failing CR pre-submit, so it's really just mainly a validation at this point.
Yeah, is this a good first issue or a good first PR to review?
Uh, Maybe possibly. I don't know if this really touches the scheduling code base, so I'm not really sure if it would be. Um,
Yeah, we definitely had I remember there being a comment on like the scheduling performance and like spot checking the scheduling performance after the change. I know
Yeah.
that was the state of the review, but
that's what we have here. I mean, the user providing some spot checks, or I guess running it against the unit tests and just validating it that way. I don't know if that's necessarily worthwhile. Like, I don't know if that's good enough validation that we want to do. Maybe we might want to add something, or maybe even hold off until we have some like actual benchmarking inside of the repo across the whole project. But nevertheless, I can assign this to myself just because there's resubmits that are failing at the moment. So it's not even in a state that we can merge it. I'll just assign it to myself, and then I will get back to the contributor, and then we can.
I so my take is I think we should hold it until we get a better understanding of our performance. Like I think we have the performance benchmarking, but I think we know that we need to do work on improving our visibility into it. I don't fully trust, like honestly, I don't fully trust the current suite that we have to like be 100% accurate all the time and like make sure that these changes when they go in don't like significantly affect the actual performance overall. Like I know we have like an AI that we want to kind of auto publish a lot of these metrics on Quack, like installing a Quack installation, running scheduling, and actually like validate these things aren't regressing in significant ways. Like whatever we do, I think we should be confident as a maintainer team about. And I don't, at least myself, I don't personally feel that bar is being met right now. So I'm wondering, like, I know we're still kind of figuring out like the right way to triage these things, but I know that, and I know that Kubernetes does like, assign this to this release version. And I'm wondering if like we're talking about something where, okay, I mean, right now we don't really have a release version process, but I hesitate to say like we're going to work on this right now when we're not confident that the bar is being met for the testing. So I almost think that we should communicate like, hey, we'll put this into backlog, make sure it doesn't auto close, but like let's make sure the testing bar is met first before we actually pull something like this in.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, we can also go about it that way and make an update. Michael, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think that's a really good point. And I was wondering, like, could we maybe, I know in the KK repos, in the Kubernetes stuff, they use a lot of different labels to say like, oh, this is like a release candidate for this or that or whatever. I wonder if we might have some like simple labels where we could say like, needs tests or something like that, or where we can just kind of indicate, yeah, we think this is a release candidate, but it's not ready yet or something. I'm not saying we need to do anything now, just kind of tossing the idea out there. Maybe it would help us with some of these triaging efforts and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have, I guess some semblance of that, at least with the issues. We don't really have that when it comes to PRs. So it may be worthwhile to define it, to define that kind of like label structure for PRs. Um, yeah, I guess we can take an AI to do that.
Yeah, I would say this is something we could probably put up as a PR, as like a README somewhere in the repo, like how we do triaging or whatever.
Yep.
And we could then decide as a group like what labels do we think would be helpful to us, and then we'd have some documentation of it for the next time someone's curious about this stuff.
We'll put an AI for that, and then Okay, I will leave this as an AI for now and then come back to figuring out how we will address it. Um, yeah, we'll do that. And I guess we'll leave this PR as is for the time being then. Okay, I think that's for the PRs that we have. Everything else is really by the maintainer team, or it's not complete just yet. So let's move on to the issues. So what we're looking at, the link is provided here, but what we're mainly looking at here are, well, when new issues are created, we have this needs triage labels uh, attached to the issue, and sometimes even if we're responding uh, to the GitHub issue itself, we will leave the label until we have kind of some semblance as to the path forward for that issue, whether it's to close it, whether it's accepting it as a feature, or whatever it may be. So right now, just looking at issues based off of those labels. Hopefully, once we do enough of these meetings, we can dwindle this down to just really being the most recent issues. And we can, I guess, prioritize also taking a look at how we want to, look at features, what is priorities when it comes to bugs and so on and so forth. So right now, what I'm planning on doing is mainly just looking at ones that are the oldest ones that have not been assigned to any individuals, and then kind of going through it that way, and then we can just quickly skim them, eyeball them, figure out exactly maybe whether it's assigning it, whether it's adding some sort of a label, whatever it may be. We can go on from there. Also here, kind of define some of the triage labels that we have in its own right, and then we can go on from there. Cool. Any questions? All right, sounds good. Then I will move forward from here. So here, so okay, so this is mainly a feature request. So it seems like the customer really just wants a way for us to opt out of pods that are inside of the cluster. Yeah, I guess for at least from my perspective, we would need more information just because of certain scenarios, whether it's us actually consolidating versus whether if we actually should be scaling up for these pending pods. This is not very clear to me. I'm thinking we need a little bit more information, and uh really it's hard. I think we really need to understand the use case here.
Is this
Any
like just a change in how they node select? Like pod select? Like in the node pool selector, if they just ignore low priority, would that fix this? If you don't want a provision capacity for no priority, you label them differently and you don't get selected by the node pool.
Yeah, but I guess like I guess in that cases though, like those we wouldn't, even if we didn't provision with those pods, would they go on? I guess the question is like, would they actually be then would they actually get added to nodes that we have scaled up, which I don't think in that case would happen, right? Like, if you were filtering out these low priority pods, like if Carpenter didn't scale for them, if they were still at pending capacity, they still would like. It seems like they still want nodes to go on to those workloads and really not consider them even, I guess, for consolidation purposes, which I don't like. Carpenter wouldn't really have a mechanism to do that today, right?
Oh, It's a weird use case. We
Okay. Cool. I guess for the time being, I will take an AI to add needs information. Information. I will take an AI for the time being to just be like to add. Do we really just need to understand the use case better here before we even remove the label? So in our next meeting, we'll be able to at least, if they provide a comment, we'll take a look at that point in time. Here, so spot.
So a question on how Karpenter calculates underutilization. I am guessing that it uses the requests on, or will it use requests on pods on that node to determine utilization thresholds? Do we know? Like, I just don't know the internals of Karpenter well enough.
So you're asking like what it uses to determine like whether it should consolidate the node?
Right, like it's looking here like they want to, when it's more than 10% underutilized, they want a consolidation to happen, right?
Yeah, so we basically took, I think they maybe hit it. I mean, just from looking at the error message that was coming below, they seem to be hitting an issue where they're we're trying to split the node into two, as far as I could tell. I'd have to read up on this more. I mean, at least that's what the title says, which we don't
Yeah.
support right now. So like the larger issue with as a feature, I guess, and potentially possible, but just like performance considerations have to be like taken into account. Just the number of calculations we have to perform is basically like, can we take a node that we have and split it into two and determine that the cost of those two nodes is cheaper than the one that we had and still be able to be performant? Because we don't support that right now. Like the replacement has to, like we have to have a single replacement for the node that we're consolidating. And and the question is like, where do you stop? Like, okay, 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Like, when do you basically say, okay, I won't do like try and figure out all the combinations, because every time you create like go from one to something else, like you have to, it's a number of permutations, obviously. But to answer your original question, there's no like thresholding that happens right now. Like it's literally just a math equation to determine like, okay, there's a node. We're going to try and consolidate it, which means we're going to try and take all the pods that are on that node and try and reschedule them elsewhere, or to create a replacement if it's required. So we'll just like throw those pods into the scheduling algorithm. And if we get either a cheaper node, or we find that we don't need a new node at all, then we'll consider that a consolidation option that we can execute. The problem here, I think, again, is that when we're putting all those requests into the scheduling algorithm, it's producing two nodes, which we say, okay, that's invalid. And then we just keep going.
Yeah, I didn't know about the single node replacement, but that makes total sense. What just, for context, my thinking was sometimes a problem I see with users who are doing like underutilization thresholds and whatnot is they forget that they put some huge request into one of their workloads, and then it's like, okay, well, all the at least with cluster autoscaler, it uses some calculations like that. So that's why I was curious how Karpenter was doing it, calculating the utilization thresholds, because it's like, well, the user might have forgot that they like put some pod spec in there with some giant thing on it. And it's like, okay, that's why it's not doing what you want. But I guess the same would be true in the scheduling algorithm anyways.
Yeah.
So I guess this has been open for a while. I think mainly this, I guess this PR mainly needs Jonathan, I guess, do you think it'd be worthwhile? I don't know if we have a mega issue around consolidation taking into account multiple I guess candidates. I guess in a way like splitting out an instance into being into multiple to see if that's cheaper. Do we have a PR or not a PR, but a GitHub issue that may be worthwhile to
Unless somebody else remembers, I don't remember off the top of my head. I could take a look. I probably need to read through this issue a little bit more to understand like if that's the actual ask. You can, I mean, I'm fine to take a look at it and just take a look and see if any of our issues already capture this. But yeah, I mean, if it's not there, I would just throw this into a larger bucket of like, can we, yeah, like you said, take a single node or multiple nodes and produce two nodes and then determine if that's better. It,
I was just gonna follow on to what Jonathan was saying there. I think that sounds like something we would definitely want an RFC for, if only to describe like, once we've all decided on a behavior we want, then, you know, then we kind of know how it's gonna act or whatever.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be worthwhile. Okay, cool. So it just seems like we just need a little bit of triaging here to understand what the customer is looking for. Cool. Let's then now move on here. Webhooks I did. So I think we can possibly close this issue because we don't have mutating webhooks. I'm understanding the oh, never mind. Actually, this is an entirely different feature request.
I thought there was a well-known label for architecture type or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kubernetes should have a default label for architecture type.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a need to design anything else like that. That should be where the scheduler looks to that stuff, I thought, to land workloads and everything.
Yeah. So they're likely not labeling their stuff.
it's they're not running multi-arch. Is that what this is? Like
I think
they're
some of them is
mainly-
not, yeah, some of the workload is not multi-arch.
I mean, this is a fairly I've seen this a lot. It's mostly just like app teams not knowing, you know, and yeah, I know it's a difficult thing for the platform teams to do to like fully understand what's being, I mean, the the short answer is support multi-arch or like make your app teams directly put these on their pods, but
Right, it's like
It,
50% of all auto scaling problems are like configuration issues. You know?
it feels like this is like, yeah, outside of what Karpenter should be doing. Like it shouldn't be like trying to change the pod, change the node so that you don't screw up.
Yeah, +1 Garvin. Like the scheduler already knows how to handle this stuff. You know, it's just a matter of making your stuff configured so the scheduler does it for you.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I wonder, should we just leave that as a comment on this and ask like, you know, like why are the default scheduling options not like sufficient? Or did somebody already ask that? I don't know. I'm not familiar with this issue.
Yeah, I think
It seems like Nick was already asking the question there. Like Nick was ahead of us on this one, right?
I think it's worth clarifying what Carpenter is trying to do in this like place in this role, and it's not really a role that carpenters should be touching. and that's why it may not make doesn't really make sense for this to be incorporated into the project.
Yeah, yeah, that seems reasonable. I think we have pretty general alignment here. Maybe Garvin, I don't know if you want to take up commenting on
Yeah,
this
I can do that. Yeah.
or this issue. This is your alias, right?
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. I guess so. Now that we have the node repair feature at least supported within Karpenter, this should be solved for customers if they're on a provider that supports node repair and is actively looking for not ready nodes. So at least in my mind, I'm actually inclined to close this issue out. I guess with the I mean, for whatever got the customer into a situation where their node is not healthy, they will need to investigate further. But from at least from a Karpenter perspective, we have solved this problem for a customer. So it might be worthwhile just
Says
closing.
it's waiting and terminating for a while though. Like it sounds like we did terminate it, right?
Let's see. Mm. What version are they on? 37. And it's terminating. Is there any?
One thing that's weird to me is I can't tell if this node is so they said it's running on EC2, is terminate or kubelet stop running, at which case like for like general like, Kubernetes, like if your kubelet's not running or like a lost network connectivity, there's nothing the control plane can do in terms of deleting the node. It's just loss, right? Like it's just it won't do anything further because it's like, oh, it's terminating. I don't know what state this node was in, but it feels like it somehow is partitioned and we aren't able to discover it through the Kubernetes control plane, in which case the default is to leave it and wait for a human to do something with it, at least in Kubernetes. It might be worth knowing how it got to this state. Because sounds like something's unhealthy, like something broke on the node and the control plane no longer understands sees it. And that's why it's stuck in terminating, because no status is being updated from the kubelet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the EC or I guess from the AWS provider perspective, like as soon as we get back a signal from the cloud provider that the underlying instance is terminated, we will just remove our finalizer such that like so then that like the deletion timestamp and the actual cleanup of the node should take place. Um, so I guess I really can't think of a scenario where this should happen unless the node itself didn't have a deletion timestamp that's set on it. I'm also curious.
Even if you set a deletion timestamp, if the node kubelet fails the response back, you don't get to progress to the next steps to actually using the EC2 terminate, right? Like it sounds like one of the comments like when it happens, I couldn't log into EC2, it doesn't respond. Like that sounds like it's a bad node. Oh, sorry. Let me go for it.
No, go finish what you were saying. Go.
Okay, it sounds like something broke on the node that it lost connectivity. And even if you set a deletion timestamp on the node, like it without the kubelet being able to respond, there's no next steps for a node because usually it's like, oh, it's not responding. And you don't proceed with deleting the node because it's like stuck in that weird state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Carvin. Like if the node stops heartbeating, then it just goes into this like unknown state, right? But if there were like assuming there was a CCM there, because theoretically there would have been a CCM if they're depending on where they're running, right? Like the CCM should have been the one confirming if the instance actually exists, right? So like I would want to know, did they have anything in the bug here that said the instance actually exists? Because the cloud provider, it could put the node into a terminating state, right? But if it never gets confirmation from the infrastructure that the instance was removed, right, then it wouldn't delete the node object. Like it would only do that once it confirms that the instance is gone. So I would also be wondering, like, okay, was there also some underlying condition in the infrastructure that should be investigated? Like what did the instance actually disappear?
Yeah, according to them, the EC2 is still showing up on the EC2 console, but they haven't gotten much. Like it doesn't sound like the node is in a good state. In which case, usually, yeah,
Yeah, the
that's
CCM is
yeah,
not going to remove it though, right? Because
yeah,
if the
yeah,
CCN queries the infrastructure and the infrastructure says, yeah, it exists,
yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Then it's
So it's
just
like,
gonna, so like
yeah,
this is like there might have been a problem with their operating system on that node or something. Like they might have had, depending on how they're running Kubernetes, there might have been an issue with it.
Yeah.
Is this on EKS or do we know? Are they just
I
running it
think
on?
it's EKS. I assume actually they don't actually. I think they're using EKS because they said something about EKS bootstrap script, which only really works for EKS mash nodes.
Yeah, because like for my money, the next thing I would do would be like, all right, what happened on the actual instance? Do we have logs from like the kubelet process running on that instance? Like I don't know how EKS runs those services, but like yeah, like what output do we have from that stuff? Like do we know the node was actually healthy?
I think like the second last comment kind of talks about what we kind of chat about, like essentially like, yeah, this is common. When it's stuck in an unknown state, we don't do anything to it. Sorry, when I say we, it's like autoscalers or like Kubernetes providers.
Yeah.
Comment about disruption is interesting too.
Yeah. I guess this is something that probably worthwhile to investigate a little bit more. Um, I mean, I guess from the conversation that we're having here. Um, yeah.
Uh, I guess one thing I'll say is like maybe they should open Ava's ticket to investigate further if they are on ECAS because we don't have the full information on that ECU instance. It's just that they on the Java thing, but that's meaningless. And it seems like they don't have access to ECU afterwards. So like it might be worthwhile for them to cut a ticket with AWS and see as
Yeah.
a starting point, just because this is a weird situation. And I don't know what to do from Carpenter's side. Like it doesn't feel like something that once again Carpenter does necessarily. Um, but I'm open to us trying to do something. I don't know what that is though.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess yeah, in these kind of scenarios, at least, I mean, we have node repair that will actually go and forcefully terminate you. At least I mean, it's an alpha feature flag for the time being, so that we'll actually delete the underlying instance and then um, forcefully like move your pods over. So yeah, I mean, we have a little bit of a fix for it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess the more I don't know if we are covering this particular case. Um, but okay, that sounds, I guess, good for the time being. I can take an AI just to ask them to move this over to the AWS provider and then go from there. Oh, there you go. actually, Carmen, since you've already done that, I'll just assign this to you as well then.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
So, okay, we have 1 minute left. One last thing I did want to say is, oh, interesting. I did not know this. Maybe I'll take a look at this later.
You can use my, I guess, public one instead of the one tied to my company. But we can deal with that later.
Yeah, that's fine for the time being. One thing I did want to add is I'm gonna add another section, at least in our logs here, to include any like customer issues that we would want to talk about and address in these meetings. That way that, prior to going off to any other thing that we can have, anything that anybody else here wants to discuss. One last thing was, I'm gonna also add a second section around feedback as to how we can potentially improve these meetings. If anybody has any feedback or recommendations, also feel free to just add them into the Carpenter dev channel in the Kubernetes Slack. But yeah, I think that is time for us. Please feel free to give us any feedback that you may have as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thank you.